Years after the E3 2016 announcement, the elusive PS4 exclusive Days Gone is finally available in all of its zombie-horde-slaying glory. Reviews have been, well, mixed. On one hand, critics are frustrated with what's being described as feeling a few years too late. It's been almost universally panned for its generic zombie-slaying plot, but, and this is crucial, like we said, reviews are mixed. While the story suffers a bad case of Walking Dead-itis, Days Gone's technical accomplishments have received a lot of praise. Luckily for Days Gone, this feature is a tech deep dive. The technology powering Days Gone is undeniably impressive, so let's take a closer look at it. Engine. Days Gone makes use of a modified version of Unreal 4. Unreal 4 hasn't enjoyed the ubiquity on consoles as Unreal 3 did on 7th gen platforms. Nevertheless, a lot of Unreal 4 powered titles have made their way onto 8th gen platforms. While the engine is capable of some truly spectacular visuals, and seriously, look again at the E3 2013 Elemental demo, it's been utilized far more often by indie devs this generation, as opposed to AAA teams. Apart from Vampire and Sea of Thieves, there are precious few mainstream titles that really push the envelope with Unreal 4 on the PS4. Gears of War 4 demonstrated that, at least in relatively focused cover shooting experiences, Unreal 4 can provide stunning visuals and reliable performance. As an open-world experience, Days Gone arguably pushes the envelope even harder. Unreal 4 is no stranger to games with open-ended maps. Many indie experiences on the engine such as Colat feature open worlds, albeit small ones. Days Gone's achievement lies in scaling that tech up to handle a 30 square kilometer environment, competing directly with the likes of Dunia and Avalanche, both of which have been built from the ground up to accommodate large play spaces. AAA production values and wide open environments, these are what SIE Bin's fork of Unreal 4 brings to the table. As with the Unreal 3 engine, the utility of using Unreal 4 lies in how open it is, relative to the competition. Because it is a source-available engine, limitations in the source code aren't set in stone. Developers can get hold of the source, tweak it, and add modules to meet their requirements. As we've mentioned, giant open worlds weren't exactly what Epic had in mind when building Unreal 4, but nevertheless, looking at SIE Bin's history, they have quite a bit of experience slotting square pegs into circular holes. Getting game engines to contort in directions they were never meant to is almost a specialty of SIE Bin's. The studio has a number of well-received mobile conversions under its belt, including Uncharted Golden Abyss and Resistance Retribution. Both of these titles did more with substantially less, bringing what was close to a full console experience kicking and screaming onto the PS Vita and PSP respectively. SIE Bin has evidently done quite a lot to transform Unreal 4 into a visually stunning open-world engine, with capability of rendering large numbers of zombies on screen, just like in the Dead Rising series. Frame rate and resolution. In general, first-party developers tend to make use of bespoke engines to extract the most from their platforms of choice. At Sony, Santa Monica's God of War and Sucker Punch's Infamous are cases in point. The whole point of general-purpose engines like Unreal 4 is to offer adequate performance and visuals while scaling well to multiple platforms. It isn't exactly the option of choice to deliver the best performance or the best image quality. So, how do frame rate and IQ stack up in Days Gone? On the base PS4, Days Gone runs at a native 1080p. The Pro takes this up a notch to 4K, albeit by utilizing checkerboard rendering. 1080p output on the PS4 is pristine. As a 30 FPS title, there is no pressing need to sacrifice IQ to keep the frame rate high, so image quality remains consistent throughout. The PS4 Pro's implementation of checkerboarding isn't the best, however. It's presentable on 4K monitors, nevertheless, many scenes, particularly those with use of heavy transparencies, show clear artifacts from the upscaling. This isn't a showstopper by any means, and as we've mentioned, IQ is good enough. As far as frame rate is concerned, Days Gone was built from the ground up as a 30 FPS title. The priority has clearly been to maximize frame quality over quantity. CPU-intensive factors like the large number of freakers appearing simultaneously on screen limit the headroom for frame rates above 30. CPU side bottlenecking also plays a role in differing levels of frame rate consistency between the Pro and base versions of the game. The Pro version manages to hit a locked 30 FPS much more often than the base PS4 version, which tends to fluctuate, especially when there are a large number of enemies on screen. The Pro's boost to CPU clock speed is visible here. Unreal 4's own temporal anti-aliasing solution comes into play here. While temporal AA does an excellent job of cleaning up jaggies, especially in motion, it does so at the cost of introducing a slight softness to the image. As a result, the presentation is a bit fuzzy on both platforms. This is more evident on the PS4 Pro, where TAA blur makes fuzziness from upscaling more pronounced. In some games, however, a softer presentation isn't a bad thing. As a third-person title with a slower, more considered pace than typical shooters, a pristine image isn't crucial from a gameplay perspective. A clean, if slightly soft, aliasing-free image works for the best here. Character modeling. Days Gone presents an interesting problem with regards to character models and poly counts. How do you render very large numbers of enemies on screen without suffering from either terrible performance or, well, terrible visual quality? Overall polygon counts on main characters are good, not great. Deacon's model features an adequate level of detailing by 8th gen standards, but the need to budget for so many freakers on screen means that main character polys aren't exactly in the same league as God of War or Uncharted 4. Cutscene models are obviously a step above the in-game presentation, but even here it's evident that some concessions have been made. Deacon's clothing appears to be stuck to his body, and in close-up shots, incidental details show a low degree of fidelity. His collar and even his bandana have rough, pointy edges. Secondary characters fare much worse. Static, low-poly clothing clings to their skin. Hair is also static, which is somewhat jarring to see on characters with longer hair. If it wasn't for the excellent skin shading, subsurface scattering is being deployed here, character models look almost like they came out of a cross-gen title from 2013. Environmental geometry also takes a hit, and again, this is particularly evident in the case of incidental detailing. Circular metal frames such as those accompanying ladders are chunky, as are other incidental objects like sandbags and posts. Deacon's bike is adequately detailed, but considering just how important it's been hyped to be, we're not surprised about resource budget allocated to your means of transport. What's important though is that the low poly nature of many environments won't likely be noticed when you're fleeing from a massive horde of freakers. It's evident that poly counts have been budgeted conservatively. By trimming down on incidental details in the environment, SIE Bend ensures that large freaker hordes can be rendered without major performance implications. Materials and textures. Physically based rendering is in use here. While concessions were made in terms of raw poly counts, material rendering more than makes up for this. The use of PBR results in impressively rendered ground cover, as well as accurate depictions of stone, masonry, and wood. Because the game is set in Oregon's forest, accurate material rendering for wood and bark go a long way towards adding to the atmosphere. Materials and texture work more than compensate for geometry. While minor character models often feature blurry textures, the environment is liberally covered in sharp 1K and 2K textures. These hold up well even when upscaled to 4K. Lighting and shadows. Lighting is Unreal 4's strong suit, and this shows in Days Gone. Unlike Unreal 3, Unreal 4 uses deferred rendering by default. Deferred rendering allows for a large number of dynamic lights on screen at a given time. This is seen in Days Gone, where nearly all of the light sources, from the sun itself to small lanterns, cast dynamic shadows on the environment. The sun shadows in particular move around based on the time of day. Dynamic shadows from smaller light sources, especially at night, add substantially to the atmosphere, and this makes motorcycle rides at night a uniquely thrilling experience. The headlight throws trees, rocks, and lurkers into stark relief. Shadowing in Days Gone deserves special mention. This is an area where SIE Bend has delivered well beyond our expectations. SIE Bend makes full use of Unreal 4's shadowing capabilities to deliver an open-world title with some of the best shadow coverage we've ever seen. The headline feature here is screen space shadowing. This is an infrequently used technique that, to drastically oversimplify, can be thought of as SSAO meets screen space reflections. So, how does this work? SSAO itself uses the depth buffer to calculate the degree to which each pixel location is occluded from the light. This is done at the post-process stage. SSAO allows for indirect and diffuse shadowing to be accurately represented. Screen space reflections are a simple post-process technique which also utilize the depth buffer. Instead of calculating diffusion, depth values are used to approximate dynamic reflections of objects within the camera's view. As we'll see, this is also the main limitation with screen space shadows. Days Gone's screen space shadows uses a similar technique, but instead of approximating real-time reflections, they approximate real-time shadows. The advantage of on-screen space shadowing is that all kinds of objects, which should otherwise cast no shadows at all, cast relatively sharp shadows when viewed head-on. In normal viewing scenarios, this puts Days Gone's shadow rendering far ahead of other open-world titles. Volumetric light and fog are used extensively throughout Days Gone's environments, adding significantly to the atmosphere. Volumetric light interacts with the shadowing system to create complex, layered lighting effects that are truly a sight to behold. Post-process pipeline. Days Gone has an extensive post-processing pipeline that contributes substantially to its desolate atmosphere. We've already covered some of the post-process techniques that are in use in the game: SSAO for indirect lighting, screen space reflections, and the unique screen space shadowing. Apart from this, film grain is very evident in cutscenes, adding a sense of grittiness. Film grain also comes into play at night. Camera-based motion blur is in place, but, and rather surprisingly, for a 30 FPS title, the game takes a light-handed approach to it. While this can cause some of those dips below 30 FPS look notably less fluid, we like how it helps to maintain pristine image quality even when in motion. Freaker rendering. Days Gone's feral zombie hordes, called Freakers, are a minor technical marvel and a big part of the reason why corners had to be cut in other areas. Perhaps the only other game where we've seen such a density of detailed enemy characters on screen at once are the Dead Rising series and, to a lesser extent, Dying Light. Hordes of Freakers are integral to Days Gone's gameplay. While individually weak, you won't stand much chance against a large horde, forcing you to sneak around or flee on your bike, which of course uses up gas. Up to several hundred Freakers can come after you at any given time. While individual Freakers are obviously not rendered with the same fidelity as NPCs, they come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. A variety of procedural rendering is likely at work here, with a fixed set of variables such as height, gender, clothing type, and color that are randomized. This prevents the Freaker hordes from turning into a post-apocalyptic version of Clone Wars. Freaker AI is significantly more complex than that of zombies in similar games like Dead Rising 3. Freaker AI has been colorfully termed the Freako system by SIE Bend. Freakers aren't entirely mindless. There is some basic behavioral scheduling. Different classes of Freakers exhibit different behavior patterns to keep the player on their toes. Freaker behavior is also influenced by the weather system, with rain, for instance, reducing their hearing ability, making it easier to sneak past them. What's perhaps more interesting than Freaker AI is the behavior of Marauders, human enemy NPCs who actively attempt to find you. This takes the familiar open-world gameplay loop, explore, find camps, and attack, and inverts it. Complex AI interactions can be turned to your advantage, however. For instance, you can use the ever-present threat of Freaker hordes to reverse a Marauder ambush, then stand back and watch the AI units fight each other. These moment-to-moment interactions are crucial, especially considering that Days Gone's generic story offers little motivation by itself to push forward. Cutscenes. As hype built around Days Gone, SIE Bend made much about how they tried to balance the open-world nature of the game with storytelling. While, judging by the reviews, the story they tell isn't that great, in-engine cutscenes are technically accomplished and offer a clear step up from the gameplay visuals. Model quality is a step up, although minor characters still appear rather blocky. Texture work also holds up fairly well in close-up shots. The biggest upgrade to cutscenes, however, is the enhanced skin shading. A subsurface scattering implementation is used to simulate light transport across the skin's surface. This prevents NPCs' faces from exuding that waxy cast found in many other titles. While hair is static and looks so-so, high-quality face textures and normal maps combine with the subsurface scattering to present convincing visuals of character faces up close. Apart from the improvement to facial presentation, post-process effects see liberal use. We found the film grain to be a tad excessive, but that's more down to artistic preference than really anything else. Animations. As far back as 2014, before Days Gone was officially announced, details had emerged about its animation system, and in particular, about its use of inverse kinematics. Inverse kinematics has seen increasing use in recent titles. It represents a significant step up from conventional ragdoll physics. IK mathematically determines the parameters for joint movement. In much the same way that PBR allows artists to define physically accurate lighting properties for materials, IK allows animators to set realistic joint movement parameters to allow for more dynamic animations. IK's impact is subtle, but the smoother and more realistic animations ground NPCs and the player in the world. They don't appear to float above it, like for instance in Source Engine games. Days Gone wasn't quite the game changer that Sony's hype engine led us to believe. The game has overly familiar gameplay loops and a bland story. What makes it interesting, however, is the way that SIE Bend managed to take the Unreal 4 engine and build an expansive open-world title with it, without compromising on visuals or performance. Unreal has been used to power just about every genre of game, from isometric tactics games to first-person shooters to RPGs. Days Gone shows that the engine can be used to craft an open world that can compete with the best of them, if only it had a compelling story to go along with it. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.